Hey guys, this is Cole Patterson, and this is the first of several Illustrator tutorials that will be included on our website. This first one is going to be on the 5 essential tools that anyone using Illustrator should know, as well as how to set up a new file in Illustrator and what to know about it. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and hit New File in Illustrator, and we're going to set this to a couple friendlier numbers, 8 and 6. Now, when setting up a document, you have a couple things that you can do. We'll ignore these for now because they're pretty in-depth and user-specific, but you can set the width and height of your artboard, which is essentially just the canvas you'll be working on, as well as how many canvases you have available to you, just right out of the gate. Now, you don't have to be married to these numbers. There are ways to change any and all of this at any point once the file is created. It's very easy to do, very intuitive. We'll get into that in another video. For now, we'll do 6 and 8, and we'll show off the orientation right quick, which just flips the width and the height so that you can have either portrait or landscape without having to go in and change your data. Bleeds we will cover later. We won't cover too much here other than you want to set your RGB or CMYK colors according to whether you're making something for a screen, in which case you'll use RGB, or something for print, in which case you'll use CMYK. We'll do screen for now, so RGB. And if you have a computer that can handle it, set your raster effects as high as possible. Always have it at least at 150. I'm putting mine to 300. And all that does is make things like blurs and feather effects come out looking nicer in the preview and in the final result. But that's all that there is there. So we'll go ahead and hit create. And what we're going to do to show off these tools is we're going to make a little heart. So the first tool that we're going to create is, create with, I should say, is the pen tool. The pen tool is the bread and the butter of Illustrator for anyone not using an artboard, an art pad like a Cintiq or a Wacom tablet. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by just making a simple little shape. I'm going to make a little hexagon. It's not going to be perfect, but it doesn't have to be. The pen tool is mostly straightforward. It has the shortcut P, and there are a couple different ways you can use it. In the first case, what I did is I just took and I clicked and moved and clicked and moved, and you can use it to make nice static geometric shapes. Another way that you can use it is to hold down as you click, and you'll see these little balls connecting and expanding out from the anchor point that I'm placing. Those are curve controls. Those are handles to control the level of curves. So on a needed basis, you can do this to affect the curve of the line that you are placing, as well as the curve of the line that precedes it, so that it has a smooth continuation from this line to the next. Now, that can come in handy, but it's not always the best thing to use. It's really a case-by-case basis, and there is a bit of a learning curve to using it. The best thing you can do is just practice with it until you feel comfortable with it and you start recognizing when to use which. But it is a very straightforward tool. In addition to it, there are 2 tools, the add anchor point and delete anchor point tools, which have plus and minus respectively as their shortcuts. The nice thing about those tools is they do technically show up on anything that you have selected without having to move from the pen tool. So you can see that I'm clearly in the default pen tool, but if I go to this triangle that I have selected, I can add a point and then subtract a point without having to change tools. Very nice, very convenient. Now, on from there, we're going to go to our selection tool, which is V if you're keeping up with shortcuts. It's very straightforward. I would say it's primarily used as a transformation tool. You can easily select something just by clicking any part of it. If I click even an anchor point on an object, the whole object is selected. I can move it at will. I can rotate it at will. I can change the scale and the proportions of its width and height at will. A couple things to note are that if you hold down shift while selecting something, you can then scale something up in proportion to its original size or original dimensions. And then if you let go, you have a little more freedom with it. But it's a very handy thing to have in your toolbox to where you don't have to keep up with your starting numbers and do advanced esoteric math. It makes your life a lot easier. Similarly, if you hold shift while selecting items, if you select another item and another item, all of the things that you have selected will be additive rather than replacing one another. So if I were to click just this, then this, then this, it just changes my selection rather than if I hold down shift where it just adds them to one another. This is very useful. It's great for going in and taking exactly what you need if you need to move stuff out of the way, make a bunch of things smaller, or if you need to apply an effect to a certain set of items in a cluster of greater items. Now, kind of opposite of this, we have the direct selection tool. Again, I apologize for my voice. A little under the weather. The direct selection tool, whereas the regular selection tool would pick up objects, this one is meant to affect anchor points and lines within objects. So this object, which technically called a path, we'll call it a path. If we were to select just this anchor point, we can actually affect the placement of the anchor point, which affects the lines connecting it to its adjacent anchor points, meaning that effectively you can alter the shape of an object. Now, this is really handy, but what's possibly even more handy is the little circle that you see here. This is something that comes up when you use the direct select tool. Let's say that I needed a rounded triangle. I could select this one piece right here, this one corner, and round it out just by pulling this in. And then suddenly I have a shape that looks like a bow. Or if I wanted to, I could select the whole thing using the regular selection tool, switch over using A to my direct select tool, and curve in all of the anchor points at once. Another thing I could do is hold down shift and select anchor points, the same that we did with objects with the selection tool, and just get the points that we do need. Let's say we needed just these two, and we could curve those in a little bit. And that's essentially how you would go about using the direct select tool. Beyond that, we have the text tool, and we're going to kind of take a little vacation from working with paths long enough to talk about the text tool and the two basic ways to use it. You have your typeface here, your font style here, your font size here, and then a couple different ways to affect it. They're not entirely unsimilar to how you would affect text in a program like Microsoft Word or anything from the Office suite. So it's fairly intuitive. There are a bunch of things that you can do with it. However, the important thing is that there are two ways to place text. If you simply click your screen, you'll see that I have a little bit of text pop up. Now let's say I type Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. You'll see that the type continued to move along there because there were no bounds to the text. I simply set a starting point and it continued as needed. There were no boundaries for the text. Now, conversely, if I were to hold down click with my text tool and create a box, you can see that the text here stops where the boundaries end and automatically go to the next line. It's a very simple, like, every program that you've ever used has had some version of a text box ever since Microsoft Paint. This works very mostly the same way. The one exception being that, let's say I make something this big, and let's set our typeface to 18, and I type, again, Peter Piper picked a pack of pickled peppers, and let's make that a little bigger. I think it needs to be bigger, and we've run out of space. There are a couple things you can do here. One is to go back to your selection tool using V and simply making it bigger as needed, either widthways or heightways. Or, if you don't want to do that, you can take this button, which signifies, this little red square here signifies that you have text that is going beyond the boundaries of your box and are not being displayed. You can double click it and create a follow-up box, which will display the rest of it. And you have this nice little pathway that tells you that this text box is a continuation of this text box, that this one's a continuation of this one. That's essentially the extent of what I'll call the basics of the text box tool, the type tool. Now, the last tool that I'm going to go over is technically, hold on one moment, is technically a subset of the pen tool, but I consider it its own tool because of just how powerful it is, how essential it is. It's the anchor point tool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make myself a nice little diamond. We'll set that to lines rather than fill. We'll cover that in the next video. And we'll go to our anchor point tool located here, which has the shortcut of Shift-C. And we're going to curve these lines in. Now let's say that I don't like how curved this is on one side. I can uncurve one side of a line while keeping the other side relatively in place, like so. Another thing I can do is click an anchor point and remove the handles and their effects on the line on the sides connected to that anchor point. Like that. Suddenly this line is perfectly straight again. Let's see, what else is there about this that's very powerful? Another thing you can do with this is, of course, expand outward. It's a very basic tool, but it's one that you'll be using about as, I would say, more than just about any other tool. It is the bread and butter of Illustrator. It's I would consider it my favorite. It's the most essential piece, in my opinion. Now, considering the things that we have learned so far, how could we potentially use these? Well, let's make a heart. Let's make a heart. So I'm going to go to my pen tool, and I'm going to make a very, very geometric, basic version of a heart, like so. 1.3, and that's not terrible. Yeah, that'll do. That will do. Now, there are a couple things that you could do with this from here, but the way that I like to go about making using all of these tools to kind of form a more contoured shape from something geometric is I like to take my anchor point tool first, and I like to curve my lines to my liking, like so. And then from there, I will go in with my direct selection tool and grab all the points that I would want to have curved in. So these, for example, and these, for example. And I'm doing these at the same time because I want them to be more or less mirrored. And these two, I kind of like that they're pointed. If I were to do that, that looks not great. And this, well, you could maybe curve that in a little bit and it wouldn't look bad, but I kind of like the point on the bottom of a heart. And then that's a heart. And while that's a very simple example, you can apply this to the most complex of things, of build a geometric shape, curve the lines, and then round out the corners. And it's a very good and healthy workflow to get into when you want to make something precise. And with that, you could just throw in the type tool and write Happy V-Day. I mean, it's simple. There's a lot that still needs to be done to this to make this something worth looking at. But with the simple tools that you had available to you at this point, and 3 minutes of time at the very most, you're able to make this. And there's so much you could do to build off of this to make it into a strong composition. In the next video, what we'll be talking about is stroke, fill, and a number of the window properties that come into play the most frequently, and what window properties are. Until then, though, I hope that you've had a great day, I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I hope you've learned something.